Hello. Sorry for the delay. Welcome to the next installment of the 2020 Tribal Alliance for Pollinators webinar series. Today, we've got a special presentation on sunflower identification. Our distinguished guest presenter is Dr. Abby Moore, who is the curator of the Robert Bebb Herbarium at the University of Oklahoma, which is the home of the largest collection of plants in the state. It has over 250,000 specimens. Dr. Moore is an assistant professor in the microbiology and plant biology department and at the Oklahoma Biological Survey at the University of Oklahoma. She has a BS in biology from University of Utah and a PhD in integrative biology from University of California, Berkeley. She studies plant evolution and how plants adapt to live in different environments using DNA and RNA sequence data. She has a special interest in the sunflower family. Abby grew up in Utah and has lived in Oklahoma since 2016. She's also providing technical support and training to the TAP as we expand our seed collection efforts and our seed bank. So without further ado, Abby, I will turn this over to you.
Sounds
get our technology here. Okay, here we go. All right. And all right, so there we go. Okay, all good.
You see the right thing, Jane.
Okay. Yes, I can see the right screen. We are good to go. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the introduction, Jane, and thank you all for coming. So I wanted to talk, hopefully the first in a series of webinars talking about some of the families that are the most important plant families for pollinators, how you can recognize them, and how you can recognize a few of the really important genera within those families. So you can remember or write down my email address if you have any questions in the future. Please don't hesitate to email me, and if I don't know the answer, I can hopefully find out someone who does, and I'm happy to help at any point. So the sunflower family is also called the Asteraceae for the scientific name, and it is a really diverse family, but fortunately it has some characteristics that make it so it's easy to identify. And it's also my favorite family, so I'm kind of biased here. But it is an important family for everybody. It is one of the two largest families of plants and the largest plant family in North America, the family with the most species. The other largest family is the orchids, but they are most diverse in tropical areas instead of in North America. And it's also the largest family in Oklahoma with 370 species in the state. So it's really important for pollinators because for a whole bunch of different reasons. So when we're thinking about butterflies, the flowers produce nectar, and this is enjoyed by butterflies, moths, bees, and hummingbirds. And not all of these creatures then do much good for the plant because this hawk moth is hovering above the flower, so it's not spreading any pollen, but it's still enjoying everything. This butterfly hopefully is pollinating the thistle. This hummingbird probably not. In addition to nectar, plants in the sunflower family produce lots of pollen. And this is especially important for bees to feed their young, as well as beetles. And you can see a lot of beetles and bees visiting sunflower family members and collecting all of this pollen. In addition, once the flowers finish flowering, they produce fruits or seeds that are nutritious and favorites of birds, as well as insects. Of course, this is somewhat less desirable from the plant's perspective, but good for us. And in addition, since not only do butterflies and moths need to have food when they're adults, they also need food when they are immature, and members of the sunflower family are really important hosts for a lot of different caterpillars. And here is just one example of purple coneflower, and this is a caterpillar of the bordered patch butterfly. So how do we tell if a plant is in the sunflower family or not? There's several different characteristics. So the first characteristic is that what looks to us like a single flower is really a cluster of many small flowers, and it's technically called a head instead of just a single flower. So here is an example, our summer blanket flower. And each of these yellow things around the outside is an individual flower, and each of the red things in the center is also another flower. And so there are different kinds of flowers, and I'm going to give you the terminology here because I'm going to talk about it later in terms of how to tell some of these different groups within the sunflower family apart. But there's three different possible types of flowers in the sunflower family. Most members of the sunflower family have two types of flowers, disc flowers and ray flowers. And our summer blanket flower has that as well. So the yellow things around the outside are the ray flowers, and the red things in the center are the disc flowers. And the same is true with just a normal sunflower. Yellow things around the outside, ray flowers. The tubular flowers that are brown on the tip and yellow on the tube part of them are disc flowers. And here is a close-up of the two different types of flowers. And here is our summer blanket flower after it has started to go to seed and dropped its ray flowers. And so you can see better each one of those little star-shaped things is a single flower that has 5 points. We also have a third type of flower that is less common, but is in some types of heads. And a really good example is the dandelion. So it doesn't have any of those tubular flowers. It just has a whole bunch of these elongated ones, and they have 5 teeth. So here are some examples. We have a pale coneflower here, and it has these pale purple ray flowers and then brownish disc flowers. One of my favorite plants, Spanish gold, and it has yellow ray flowers and yellow disc flowers. This plant, common groundsel, only has disc flowers. It only has the tubular flowers. Thistles are similar. They only have tubular flowers, but there's so many of them, they kind of make a big poofy flower head. And then our pussy toes also just have little tubular flowers, kind of inconspicuous ones. And then we have a little daisy, the Arkansas least daisy, that has yellow flowers in the center, disc flowers, and white ray flowers. And of course, our blanket flower, very colorful with red and yellow ray flowers and red disc flowers. And for the sunflowers, the disc flowers are really important because those are the main ones that produce seed and produce pollen. But the ray flowers are the things, they're specialized to attract the pollinators, to make the flowers prettier, so that bees and butterflies flying by will notice them and will stop and visit. So another characteristic, another thing to look at when you are trying to figure out what kind of plant it is to turn the flower head upside down and look at the base of it. And if the plant is in the sunflower family, there will be a whole bunch of little leaves called bracts that surround the base of the flower head. And these are mainly to protect the developing seeds because all kinds of insects want to eat them because they're so nutritious, and it's a big concentration of nutritious things. So here, this is an example of a common sunflower and just all these nice leaves around the base. And then on a dandelion, we have some that are more upright, and then we have some that are curled back. And they can be pointed and a little bit sharp in some plants. And here in our common groundsel, we have a row of short bracts that have black tips, and then a row of long bracts that surround the flowers. And then, of course, on thistles, the bracts are tipped with little spines to further protect the flower head. And with our pussy toes, they're just kind of these little papery things. And our last characteristic to look at is the pappus. And this is something that is on top of the seed, and it can be made of scales or of bristles. And this is something that will help the seed either be blown away from the plant in the wind, or if they are sharp, it can potentially make the seed be attached to an animal, and then the animal will carry it away to some new place. So here are some examples. In the sunflower, the pappus is just little scales. So it's not really good for much, and it falls off really early. Then, quite common in the sunflower family, we have a pappus of soft bristles, and this is useful because it makes the seeds blow away in the wind, like I said, when once everything is mature. And this is our dandelion, and this is a good example here. Not only do we have a pappus of soft bristles, but it's on top of a stalk to give it more of an umbrella-like quality and have it fly even further. And then we have our four-nerved daisy, and this pappus is of scales and can maybe get stuck in some fur or something like that. So just a review of some of the major characteristics of the sunflower family that we went over. So the first thing is that the flowers are what looks like a single flower. When you look closely at it, you can see that it's really a cluster of several to many small flowers. So it's technically a head as opposed to an individual flower. And when you look at that, you can see that each of these individual pieces of the head is distinct and has all of the normal flower parts. Each little piece produces pollen and will produce its own fruit. So the individual flowers making up this head can be one of three different kinds: disc flowers that are tubes, ray flowers that are elongated, and ligulate flowers that are also elongated. Then when you turn the head upside down and look at the bottom of it, it's surrounded by these little leaves, and the characteristics of these leaves can help us identify which particular sunflower it is that we're looking at. And then another way of telling different types of sunflowers apart is to look at the pappus, which are these scales or bristles that are at the top of the fruit or the sunflower seed, and that will help the fruit be dispersed. Okay, so now I've talked a little bit about how you can see if a plant is a sunflower or is not. And now I want to talk about some specific groups that are really important for pollinators. And it can be, there are 370 species in the sunflower family in Oklahoma. So there's a couple different parts to this. And so I'm just giving a brief introduction now, and there's going to be an upcoming webinar where you will learn all about this from my colleagues. So there's kind of two parts when you're collecting seed. The first part is you need to go and see the plants when they're flowering, and then you can find them a lot easier. And when you do that, then you can collect a voucher specimen so you can either which is basically a pressed plant specimen. And using this specimen, you can take it home and identify it, or you can send it to someone like us and we can identify it at the Bebb Herbarium. And so this means that you don't have to worry about figuring out exactly which of these 370 species in the sunflower family your plant is, because you can just collect the pressed plant specimen and then you can collect seeds from that exact same plant or that exact same group of plants, and then we will be able to tell you what seeds you've collected. So, and in the sunflower family, it is often easy to identify the genus, but really hard to identify which species. But fortunately, in these genera that I'm going to show you, all of the species are good for pollinators. So you would be doing something good if you collected any of them, and then you can send us a specimen and we can tell you what plant you actually have, what the species you actually have is. So the first plant I wanted to talk to you about is Liatris, or blazing star. And this is a plant that's flowering right now and will be in seed probably in a month or a month and a half, depending on the place. So it has purple disc flowers only. So each of the individual, it has several individual heads. Each individual head on this particular species looks like it only has about 3 flowers, and they're all tubular flowers. They're all disc flowers. So here is a view that shows the whole, more of the plant, the whole clusters of flowers. And each of the clusters of flowers is kind of very long and narrow. And this picture maybe shows it a little bit better. So you can see there's the base of the plant. From the base of the plant, there are several branches that are coming out with a bunch of leaves and flower heads borne directly on that main stalk. So it doesn't branch at all except for the very base. It's these kind of spike-like stalks that come out. And here are 2 stalks of heads next to each other. The one on top is all purple and is not in fruit at all. And then the one on the bottom, you can see the flowers have dried up and the feathery pappus is coming out. So these seeds are getting to be ready to collect. And this is an example of a field. This was taken in November, the very start of November, and all of the arrows, as well as a lot of other places, these kind of fuzzy spikes are Liatris stalks that are completely in seed. And so this would be a great time to collect seed from these plants. But like I say, this is the start of November. At this point, they are in full flower. I saw some, I was at Lake Thunderbird near Norman just yesterday, and I saw a whole bunch that were in full flower. So this is a great time to find this plant and then notice where it is, and then come back and collect a voucher specimen, and then come back later, a month or 2 later, and collect the seeds. And this is an example. This is not an Oklahoma species. This is a New England species, but it has a lot of bees visiting, and Oklahoma ones do as well. So another plant that is very popular with all kinds of different pollinators are goldenrods, or Solidago. These are also in full flower right now, and goldenrods are relatively easy to identify that it's a goldenrod, but they're very difficult to identify the species. But again, you just collect the voucher, and then identifying exactly what species isn't your problem anymore. We will try to identify it. So goldenrods are distinctive because their clusters of heads are usually triangular or pyramid shaped. So here is an example of a relatively small one with kind of a triangular head. Here is an example of a patch of goldenrod, and each stem is topped with this kind of a droopy pyramid with a whole bunch of yellow flowers. And so if you see anything like this, it's going to be a goldenrod. There isn't anything else that has this form of flowering stalk. When you look closely, you can see that the individual heads making up the flowering stalk are very small. And if you look even more closely, you can kind of see that each head has both little tiny ray flowers, really narrow ray flowers, like less than 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch wide maybe, and then a few small tubular disc flowers in the center. But even though the heads are small and don't have many flowers, they make up for this because the plant has so many heads. So it still has a lot of flowers and produces a lot of seed. This is what the plant looks like when it has transformed itself into and is in seed. You see the same kind of a pyramid shape, but instead of all being yellow, it's all fluffy and white because this is the pappus that is getting ready and getting all of these fruits ready to fly away in the wind. And this is the time that you would want to collect it. One distinctive thing about goldenrods is that they often have these swellings on the stems, and these are galls. These are from insects that laid their eggs inside the stem of the goldenrod, and that caused the stem to swell really large and make a nice home for this insect. So if you see a plant with a swollen stem like this, it's most common that it's a goldenrod because it's so common for these galls to form on goldenrod stems. And as far as habitat, it grows mostly in grasslands like these plants here, but a few different species are also found in forests. But they don't usually form as big of clumps because they don't have as much light. And it is very popular, like I said, with a whole bunch of different pollinators. Okay, our next plant is also one that's flowering right now or will be flowering very shortly, and that is the asters. And various different plants are called asters. I want to specifically talk about a genus called Symphyotrichum, but there are lots of others and they're generally good for pollinators. So these types of asters, they have ray flowers that can be white or purple, depending on the species. And the disc flowers also have two different colors. So the disc flowers can be yellow or reddish, but in this case, it's a difference that has to do with time and not with species. So it turns out that when the disc flowers open, they're yellow. But then after they get pollinated and start to form fruit, then they turn red. And people have looked into this and found out that this is a way of letting the pollinators know where they can find the good pollen, because once the flowers turn red, then they're warning the pollinators, don't visit this head because there's no more pollen here. So the pollinators don't waste their time visiting a whole bunch of different heads. But you would think, well, in that case, they could just have the ray flowers of the heads that have already been visited wither, so it's obvious that the pollinators don't need to visit them. But when pollinators are flying a long distance and looking for plants to visit, having the ray flowers of the old heads that have already been pollinated, the ones with the red centers, having those ray flowers still be colorful helps the pollinators find these plants as they're flying above them. And so, but then once they get to the plant, then it's obvious that they don't need to visit all of the heads. They only need to visit the ones with the yellow centers. because bees are actually pretty smart and they can learn things like this. They can learn which heads to visit. Beetles probably not so much, but bees are pretty smart. So another distinctive characteristic of asters, especially these Symphyotrichum asters, are the bracts around the outside of the head. And they are mainly white, but they have these little green tips. And so the head is kind of multicolored. It's white and green because different parts of the bracts are different colors. In addition, the bracts are overlapping, so they look kind of like roof shingles. The ones on the outside are covering up the bases of the ones on the inside. And so this is a distinctive look that lets you tell these particular types of asters from other types and from other similar plants. And the overall plant is very branched. It's not like our blazing star, our Liatris, at the start, but it's a big branched plant, and the heads are borne fairly close on short side branches. And it also grows mainly in grasslands, although some species, especially other types of asters, but some Symphyotrichum asters as well, also grow in forests. And it is also popular with a whole bunch of different kinds of pollinators. And this pearl crescent butterfly is particularly interesting because it can complete its whole life cycle on the aster, because the adults get food from the flowers, but the caterpillars will eat the leaves. So this is the purple coneflower, the genus Echinacea, and this is a plant that is not flowering now. So this plant flowers in late spring, early summer, but it is one that you can identify even now because it's fairly distinctive when it's not in flower as well. So it has light or dark purple ray flowers and brown disc flowers. And you can look here and you can say, wait, but that looks like they have red disc flowers. But we will take a closer look at that in a minute and see what is really going on there. So here is our pale coneflower again. It often has lighter purple ray flowers and still brown disc flowers. And here is a close-up of a young head. So we can see our ray flowers are just developing. They aren't very long yet. And then we see all these red pointy things in the center. And they're actually not the disc flowers. The disc flowers are little green bumps that are still in between them. But these are things that are growing on the flower head and are kind of protecting it. So they're kind of like armor to protect the developing disc flowers and to protect the fruits. And I'm sure they are also good, since they're so colorful, they're also good for attracting pollinators. Then we can look at, this is what the plants look like right now. They are very brown. Sometimes they may have some leaves at the base still if it has rained. And if the butterflies have not eaten their leaves, but they have these very distinctive dark flower heads. And if you take a close look, you can see all of these pointy things that are still visible between the seeds. So this way you can know, and this is not something that's going to really fall apart. I mean, you can break it apart. I would probably wear gloves because they're fairly sharp at this point since they're all dead and dried out. But it's not something that really crumbles in your hands. It's a very solid mass, and birds obviously can perch on it when they are eating the seeds, but it also protects the seeds and makes it so they won't just blow away in the least little bit of wind before they're ready. So this is something that you can potentially use to identify this plant now, even if you didn't see it when it was in flower. And here is an example, a bordered patch caterpillar, a type of butterfly. And this was taken in my garden, and these butterfly caterpillars basically went from one purple coneflower to another and ate them completely down to nothing. Since it's my garden and I'm watering the plants, they were able to resprout, and they seem to have survived the experience. Okay, last but not least, I had to include one of my favorite plants since it was also on your list. This is Grindelia ciliata, or waxed goldenweed. Before, I think I had a different common name. I think I called it Spanish gold. It's two different names, but the same plant. And this plant is also in full flower right now. It's some of the earliest heads on many of these plants are also starting to produce seed. So, like the goldenrod, it has yellow, gray, and disc flowers. Unlike the goldenrod, it has much bigger heads and many fewer heads per plant. So its heads are in clusters at the ends of stems, and these are about, I don't think I have my hand in any of these pictures for scale. Each of the heads is probably an inch or a little bit more than that wide. So this is a very distinctive plant. You can easily find it as you're driving down the road, and it grows commonly on roadsides or disturbed areas. This is an example when it's very happy. It will form large patches, and it's very upright. Some individuals are unbranched except at the tip, so it's just one long stem that's maybe 3 feet long. Sometimes they are branched into several long stems, but the stems are always more or less vertical with these large clusters of heads at the tip. And these are some young heads, but you can see these nice bracts. They're very pointy. They aren't that sharp now, but when you are collecting your seed after it's all dried up, then they are very sharp, and you might want to be a little bit careful. The leaves also have all of these sharp points on them. Again, not as big of a deal right now when they're green, but they become kind of annoying when they're dried out. And this is what the heads will look like when they're in fruit. We have this pappus that is of soft bristles, but just like everything, it's a lot larger than some of these other things. The length of the individual bristles is probably 1/4 of an inch. And it is also beloved by all kinds of insects, butterflies, bees, wasps, and beetles. So that is all I have. Those are a few of the different really important members of the Asteraceae for pollinators that you can identify at this point in time. And thank you all for for coming, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Abby. That was absolutely terrific, and I loved it. So if people who are online here, that you can type questions in on a question box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we have time to take some of those. So if you have anything, let me know, or if you are having trouble typing those questions in, you can, if you have my phone number, you can text me, or you can email me, and I'll check those, and I can also unmute you if you'll tell me who you are. But I'm not seeing any questions yet. Let's see if we have any more coming through. Okay.
And like I say, I am also more than happy to answer questions by email. And if you have more questions, we can even set up like a virtual meeting if that would be an easier way to answer questions in the future.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, the questions are coming in now. They're pouring in. The people are just being shy. Okay. So here was a question. How do I tell the species of Grindelia? I thought I had sclerosa, but ciliata looks similar. Does that make sense?
So yes, it does. So Grindelia squarosa and Grindelia ciliata both have those same types of heads where they have yellow ray flowers and yellow disc flowers. But let me go back here. Let's see. So Grindelia ciliata has these really pointed bracts around the head, and they're not sticky. So Grindelia ciliata, like Grindelia squarosa, produces a lot of resin, but it keeps it completely within the plant. So the plant is not sticky. Grindelia squarosa has much softer curled bracts around the outside of the head that are very sticky. So you will touch it and your hands will stick to it. And it will also produce the center of a young head before it's open will be like white with all of this resin on it. And the leaves are also often very sticky. But I'm happy to, if you want to send me pictures, I'm happy to look at them further if you would like.
Okay, thank you. And the next question, would it be wrong to collect a specimen if there are just a few plants? Thinking about trying to, get a voucher specimen for identification purposes.
Yes, that is an excellent point, and there's going to be more about that in the upcoming webinar. But in general, the rule of thumb is that you don't want to collect any more than 1/20th of the amount in a population. So for example, if there are 20 stems of goldenrod, you could then collect one for a voucher. But if there are fewer than 20, then you don't want to, because you might hurt the population. And so in that case, you also, if it's really small, probably don't want to collect seed, or you don't want to collect hardly any seed, because then you might not leave enough seed for the population to regenerate. But if you feel that there is enough to collect a little bit of seed, but maybe not enough to also collect a voucher specimen, one thing you can do is just try to take as many good photos as possible, both close-ups of the flowers, of the leaves, as well as general photos of the whole plant. And with that, plus the location, then I think that should be enough information to identify the plant, and can also be a record for what the plant is.
Okay, also a good question. So we do have a webinar that's going to come, and I'm trying to find out the date here, but just check for your email, because we'll be sending out an announcement about it. That we're going to get into depth about how do you go and scope out the site for doing voucher and seed collection. How do you collect it correctly to do a voucher specimen? So it's one of the you've probably heard me talk. If you've been to one of our events in the last year, we received a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant about, I guess, a year ago to really expand the TAP seed bank. And as a part of that, a big part of it, we're trying to increase our training on plant identification, hence today's webinar, and also just teach people how to do voucher specimens. We're creating a new ID guide for our field collectors that will be broken out by different regions of the state, different plants that we've identified through the TAP network and with our other partners as being more critical for monarchs and pollinators, and with collection time, an easy guide about what they look like, different geographic areas. Anyway, we're trying to make this easier, and really just have more of a focus on it, because with all of our restoration efforts, we have to have the seeds to get us there. So yeah, so that is that. So do we have any more questions? We got a few more minutes if people have any more questions. Okay. Well, nope, no more coming through there. Well, thank you. So, oh, wait, here we go. One more. Sorry, hang on here. And we've got late goldenrod in Canada ID. I'm not really sure what that means. This is actually from Colin, who's one of our TAP coordinators, and that's a very mysterious question. So okay, so I'll throw one out. It is so hard with the goldenrods. Are there any easy tips about how to do that, or should we just knowing that, take our voucher specimen and knowing that in general, all of those goldenrods are really important for migrating monarchs, for our different pollinators. So do you have any tips on that, or on identifying them in just kind of a broad way?
So there are some species that are more distinctive than others. So some individual ones are fairly easy to identify and some aren't. But like the late goldenrod versus the Canada goldenrod is difficult. There are a lot of groups in the goldenrod genus are really, really similar, and people don't all agree even on what the species are. And part of that is just because this group is currently in the process of making new species. And so the plants themselves are kind of in between one species and two species. And so it's often difficult to say, okay, these individuals are definitely in this species and these are definitely in this species, because some of them may just be kind of in between and we may not really be able to tell. So that's the basic problem with goldenrods, is that they don't kind of fit our idea of, well, we have like 5 distinct different species. We have like 3 species and then 2 things that are maybe 1 species and maybe 2. So that's not a very good answer, but it's just that goldenrods are just, they don't really know themselves what's going on. And so it's difficult for us to know as well.
Okay. And Colin says, so it's not just me. Thank you. Okay.
No, it's definitely not just you.
Okay, so here's another question. So at the Bebb Herbarium, are those all voucher specimens, or do you have live specimens as a grow site too?
We do not have any live specimens. There is a greenhouse on campus, and but it is not really like a collection that you might have in a botanical garden where you have kind of historic specimens, historic trees and things like that are from known sources and stuff like that. It is just a place where some people are growing plants there for research, and then we have a bunch of miscellaneous plants that we got at anywhere from like seeds someone sent us to just randomly at Home Depot that we just use for classes. So we don't have like a scientific collection of living plants, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. And I think it looks like all. Is it open? Is the Bebb Herbarium open to the public once everything's post-COVID?
So we are open to the public, but you need to call us first to kind of arrange a time, because we don't get that many visitors, and so there isn't like someone who's always there to greet visitors, because often we're in the field or something like that. But we are very happy to have people come and either just visit the herbarium to just see what it's like, and maybe get ideas for how you might want to use it in the future, or if you have specific plant groups that you want to study and you want to be able to like look at all of the different species of goldenrods in Oklahoma at once and then be able to identify them, perhaps, if it's possible. So we are definitely open either for just kind of tours or for study, and we're happy to help you, like I say, look at your plants either in person or via email or with specimens sent through the mail.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you. And just also just to thank you both privately and publicly, Abby, for agreeing to help TAP with our with our seed bank, and to expand our efforts and expand our training and expand our knowledge base. And there is no TAP without the generous help of academics like you and field professionals. And so thank you. We really, 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 really appreciate it.
Well, I mean, I am really excited to help. I'm always excited to talk about plants. And you guys are doing such great work, and it's just so needed. And so I'm really happy to help in whatever way I can. So.
Okay, well, thank you. So we don't have, I guess we do not have the date, apps, and time finalized exactly for the next webinar, which is going to be on the voucher information and the site collection information, all that kind of stuff. But we'll be sending out an announcement about that soon. We've, like everybody else, a lot of our workshops and efforts have been on pause this year, but we are going to be doing webinars, and we're also still here. The staff is still working, the TAP staff, and so anything that we can do, if you have questions about your own seed collection efforts that you're doing, or anything that we can assist you with, you're interested in getting seeds out of the seed bank, we have our TAP lending library of all sorts of equipment you need to both install native plants at your site and maintain them, keep your restoration site free of invasives. We have all of that available. We are in the final stages, finally, of getting our new, very, very fancy new website finished up. And so that is going to have our seed bank inventory there. It will have our lending library, so you can easily go in and check out tools. It'll have all of our reference information online, how-to videos, everything. So Colin's in the final stages of getting that wrapped up after we've all been working on it for a long time, but it's almost there. And so we'll be sending an announcement about that as well. As always, please share the word with others other tribes, other people who are interested in helping or might be interested in learning about what we're doing. So, and with that, I think that we are done. So thank you again. Thank you again so much, Abby, and thank you everyone who joined us today. And please don't hesitate to reach out if TAP can be of assistance to you in any way. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.